Warning: spoilers for the entire Life is Strange series of games ahead. This video will include mentions or depictions of violence, bullying, suicide, racism, sexual assault, and drug use, all occurring within these video games. It is pretty much impossible to make a sequel without it being compared to the original. Making a sequel to a game with such a passionate fan base as Life is Strange is going to be even more challenging. Whether they are drawing fan art or writing fanfics, tattooing butterflies on themselves, or just saying hella way too much, fans of the original game have a lot to be attached to. The tale of the queens of Arcadia Bay touches the hearts of those who play it, mine included. I discuss the best ships, and I listen to Sid Matters to this day, plus I even tried to dye my hair blue once. It turned out green and was not pretty. Yikes. When I heard that we were about to get a real sequel to the game, I was pumped. I was sad when I found out that it was not a sequel to Max and Chloe's story, but I knew we had an amazing story already in Life is Strange, plus I've read enough awesome fanfics that I don't think a true sequel could live up to the amazing lives I believe Max and Chloe lead in the end. Playing the awesome adventures of Captain Spirit got me hyped for a new story, and I went into episode 1 completely blind and so psyched. I have both good and bad opinions about what we have experienced so far in the Diaz brothers' story, but I feel like I mostly see harsh criticism of their game for not being like the first one. I also have noticed that a lot of these posts haven't explained why they feel this way, just that it is different and different is bad. I would also love to see our Oregonian girls grow old together and live a happy life, but I can never dislike a sequel just because it isn't a carbon copy of the original. I want to more carefully examine what parts of Life is Strange 2 are different from its predecessor. Hopefully by the end of this video, we can all better discuss what we do and don't like about every game in the Life is Strange series. By the way, if it wasn't clear already, I pretty much assume a canon to the first game. Max and Chloe are madly in love, Kate is alive and totally gonna end up with a redeemed Victoria at some point down the road, and of course, Bay over Bay. There is a time to discuss whether Max's powers cause a storm, but not now. Final note before we get into it. I actually like Life is Strange 2. I think Daniel and Sean are fun, I love that it is tackling serious issues, and I think as a game it is incredibly well made, especially when compared to some awkward or buggy moments that we all tend to look over from the original. Only 2 episodes are out as of now, and it could completely turn around by the time it ends. I'll be comparing what we have so far to a completed game, so it might not always be fair. I will try to mention where we were in just 2 episodes of the original where I can as well. And I probably won't mention Before the Storm, because that amount of extra development for the characters and setting would just make things even more unbalanced for the sequel. Although I do love it and think it might be the best of the series in some ways. Just a few things to keep in mind. Now let's get into it.
It's a sunshine for everyone, but as far as I can remember.
Episode 1. The Characters. I love the story of Life is Strange, but it isn't actually my favorite part. These days, I am obsessed with literally every facet of the series, but the first thing I fell in love with was the cast. Not just the main cast, but every single character in the game. I don't think there's a person in the series that I don't love in some way. First, there's the characters that we are meant to see ourselves in. I feel Max's shyness and passion for her art. I want to be everything that Chloe is, and I aspire to be as wholesome and caring as Kate. Players who take up photography or get into punk music after finishing the game are not crazy. Whether we already possess their qualities or are inspired to emulate them, we who play Life is Strange form connections that go beyond the average video game. Then we have the smaller characters who don't have much impact in the end but are unforgettable. They don't really impact the plot of the game, but they are integral to the experience. One of my favorite parts of reading the new fanfiction is seeing who gets paired with whom. Dana x Juliet? Great, more lesbians. Brooke x Daniel? Sure, that's cute. And who can forget Victoria x Kate? The most unlikely ship to end all ships. Who gets paired or grouped, for all you Amber Price fielders out there, I see you, together, is fundamental to the fanbase. Even the people who are tough to like, from Frank to Principal Wells to the 2 villains that we will get to later, are still people. We hate some of their actions, but we'll never forget them. Whether we adore them like our precious cinnamon bun who must be protected, or flip them off every time they are on screen like stupid nice guy TM Warren, the entire population of Arcadia Bay feels like they are real people, and the effort put into them is why they feel that way. You might have forgotten that this video is actually about the sequel after all that gushing, right? I wish I could say that the cast of Life is Strange 2 feels as real and intriguing, but I can't. I'll start with the positives. Daniel is probably the best character so far, and he really does have the naive optimism of a young child. Seeing him confront the morally gray world has been very interesting, but him being an awesome and believable 9-year-old boy is also his downfall when it comes to being a relatable character. I think it's safe to say that most people playing Life is Strange 2 are not 9-year-old boys. If we are supposed to relate to our protagonist the same way we did in the first game, I don't think Daniel is really fulfilling that role. Our other protagonist, Sean, is better, but still not living up to the standards set by Max. Besides the issues he is facing, there isn't too much to speak about in my opinion. Even when we weren't searching for Rachel Amber or fearing the storm, Max was interesting with her artistic passions, her shy but witty commentary, and of course her totally canon burgeoning homosexuality. Take away being an orphan on the run and figuring out Daniel's power, and who is Sean? Sketching is this game's photography, but is it really part of Sean? I don't think so. His inner monologue doesn't betray any unique personality, and as far as we know, he has a bad case of the heteros. I don't hate him at all, but by this point, I was already obsessed with Max and Chloe. For side characters, it's even worse. Whereas before we met the student body of Blackwell almost instantly, we have gotten a lot of slow one-on-one interactions in this game. Lila, Brody, and everyone in Beaver Creek have come by one at a time and then left. We may see some of them again. In fact, the end of episode 2 pretty much confirms that Cassidy is coming back. But in Arcadia Bay, we had multiple interactions with a larger cast in less time. Clearly the focus is different in this game, but it's not shocking that people are not vibing with the storytelling style so opposed to what they are used to from Don't Nod.
Migratory animals living under changing weather.
Episode 2, The Locations. The characters weren't the only part of the first game that everyone fell in love with. Lots of people expressed their love for Arcadia Bay itself as well. It was easy to imagine life as a Blackwell student, as a Two Whales regular, or even as a customer of Frank's. There are 2 reasons I believe the locations were better in the first game. They felt alive, and we saw many of them multiple times. Not only were the places interesting conceptually, they felt real and helped us understand the story. We could feel the vibe of Blackwell's campus by seeing the students be douchey about their various passions, be they photography or drones. Our visits to the Two Whales helped us understand the entire town and the social structures in place. I can't tell you how many games don't put in the effort to make their environments feel realistic. They tend to leave you with the aching feeling of being the only real person in a fictional world that exists just to move you along the path of the story. Technically, that is true for all video games, but if there is any one that can convince me otherwise, it would be the first Life is Strange. Each time we were at the school, in the diner, or in any other repeated location, we saw different people and had different interactions. We saw small, optional storylines like Dana's love life and Alyssa's penchant for accidents unfold just by being around them, making those characters feel alive and dynamic, not just like scenery. Even the Zeitgeist Gallery in Episode 5 felt like it had real people in it, despite it being inconsequential in the end. How you interacted with these places could affect the results of important moments too, like whether Kate survives or not. It is hard not to get attached to Arcadia Bay when you really do feel like a resident. Accounting for just the first 2 episodes, we see the same places enough that we start to see the subtle storytelling. Even if you just count times we switch from indoors to outdoors, there are 7 scenes at Blackwell and 5 in Arcadia Bay proper. Now let's see if the realistic feeling of locations shows up in the newer game. Are there many people who imagine themselves as Mini-Mart customers or residents of Beaver Dam? Probably not, considering the fact that the town from Episode 2 was actually called Beaver Creek, and I'm sure some of you didn't even notice. I had to Google both of those names while writing, but I will never forget American Rust or the Two Whales Diner. The unpopulated woods in Life is Strange 2 do feel realistic because there aren't any people there, but is there anything you really care about there besides Sean and Daniel's interactions? I personally remember watching Justin and Trevor act like fools and seeing Brooke's drone casually buzzing around, and neither of those things involved Max at all. The only place that felt truly alive like Arcadia Bay in the second game for me has been the Christmas market. There we see unique moments that don't involve Sean and optional interactions. It is a breath of fresh air to me, as every other place has either been purposefully lacking activity or just killed the immersion. Sadly, the element of revisiting locations doesn't really come out in the 2 episodes we have seen so far either. The only place we go back to with a completely separate scene in between is Stephen and Claire's house, and pretty much nothing changes between our 2 visits. We don't get to talk to the same people again at different stages of their personal stories, and we will likely never see most places again. This is in keeping with the theme of being on the run, of course, but it is not helping people care about the environments. There isn't really the feeling of connectedness that Life is Strange set the high bar for. Both of these feelings could come down the road, but since we are bound for Puerto Lobos currently, I can't imagine we'll be backtracking anytime soon.
Someday we will foresee obstacles through the blizzard.
Episode 3, The Time Frame. This is one that I don't think I've seen in any discussions of the games, and maybe I'm the only one who is thinking this. But one of the best parts of Life is Strange's narrative is the realistic time frame we experience. All the events take place in sequential order, if you ignore the rewinding and alternate timeline bits, and there are very few gaps in the story. Besides sleeping, we really don't miss a moment of that fateful October week. And I love that. The mounting pressure for Max to solve all the mysteries feels so real when we know that the storm is coming on Friday. When we realize that Victoria is supposed to be the next victim of the Dark Room, the sense of urgency builds even more. The story ramps up without us even noticing, and every beat feels natural. Plus, we get so many fluffy moments too. Every interaction between Max and Chloe, from the diner to the train tracks to the pool, and honestly every other moment, oh my god, I am so gay, help us believe that the romantic storyline could realistically occur around all this tragedy. Kate's scene at the hospital gives us a nice break from the tension as well. Every facet of the story benefits from the uninterrupted sequence and the blend of tones between scenes. If you haven't caught on to the pattern yet, now's the part where we talk about how Life is Strange 2 disappoints in this category. The two episodes both do a decent job of keeping the story sequential within their own levels, but the real problem is what we miss in between Roads and Rules. An entire month goes by between the end of episode 1 and the start of episode 2, which is significantly longer than any gap in the first game. Within that month, we missed so many pivotal moments. Let's go down the list of significant moments that we know we missed, and those we can assume were significant that we did not see. Snow falling for the first time, and whether or not our boys had proper shelter. Finding the cabin. Deciding to train Daniel, and then the entire first week at the Reynolds house. Imagine the intense imagery of seeing Daniel shiver as the boys slept outside in the snow, and the relief upon finding the cabin. I'm sure Sean's inner dilemma over training Daniel would have been a great character moment for him too. We know that Sean was extremely wary of his grandparents and only went to them out of desperation, so hearing him worry about what would happen there would help us feel the stress too. Instead, I started episode 2 feeling pretty comfy at the cabin. Sure, it wasn't ideal, but there was food, shelter, and Daniel was happy. The training was going very well for the boys, and things seemed as good as they could be. This also made Mushroom's death feel all the more forced, as if the writers needed a way to make things bad again. Showing us the struggle before finding the cabin would make us fear having to leave much more. When we got to the Reynolds, I honestly felt like everything was perfect. We were finally safe. Yes, it was awkward, but life was finally good for a moment. I honestly forgot that our characters were being hunted by the police until the end of the episode. Seeing those first few days before everyone settled into a routine probably would have been delightfully uncomfortable and made everything feel more realistic and less picturesque. Now you're probably thinking, Professor Madeline, wouldn't this require an entirely different story? If we went at the pace of the first game, this story would end before we even reached the cabin. And you'd be right. I don't think the short-term sequential storytelling method from Life is Strange would work in this story. The tale of the Diaz brothers is probably going to include more time skips, and that is okay. But it also means that I'm not surprised that so many fans are struggling to connect with the story right now. Don't Nod chose to make the opposite of their successful first game in many ways, and we are seeing the consequences of that in the backlash.
Today we will sell our uniform, live together.
Episode 4, The Music. If there's anything that Life is Strange stands love as much as shipping and crying, it's the music from the first game. Everyone has a favorite song and a favorite music-based cutscene. Personally, I cry over any use of obstacles, and Santa Monica Dream will always crush me. Not only are the song choices and the scenes that include them excellent, but the way that music defines certain characters and moments adds a lot to their realness. Let's take a closer look at some awesome parts of the first game, and then get to the part you really all care about, where I trashed the sequel. Like I said, the first scene with music is one of my favorites in the whole game. I can still remember immediately loving it on my first playthrough, and then again when I replayed it next to a friend just a few weeks ago. That first storm scene is a super interesting start, then the classroom scene shows off how Don't Nod makes fun and believable dialogue and characters. You might not even realize that there isn't any music with how densely packed the photography class is. Jefferson's teaching, Max's inner monologue, Victoria and Taylor bullying Kate, and of course all the objects to observe around the classroom give you enough to consider. Then the class ends, and after some brief interactions and more monologuing, we step into Blackwell Academy proper for the first time. Headphones go in, and suddenly, atmosphere. We might expect to learn a lot about the other students and the school at this point, but Don't Nod makes a subtle declaration by separating us from the world while being physically surrounded by it. We as players are curious about who is doing what, why we are here, and how we can protect our little cinnamon bun. But Max isn't interested in any of that, being such a shy introvert. Having the music playing over all of it helps us learn about Max too, among all the other things. We are as inside of her head as we can be. Our understanding of our main character and her entire world is aided by having such a bop as To All of You open the game for us. And then there's Listo-fucking-mania. When I booted up my first playthrough of the sequel, I was ready. We had our vague and confusing intro, just like the first game. Great start. Then if we're going along a similar path to Max's tale, next we get a witty dialogue section to establish tone. Then that guitar starts. Never mind that this doesn't mirror the first game. We've established that being different is not inherently bad. Just the upbeat tone of Listomania feels so wrong. What is the narrative significance of this tonal shift? If it's the way that we'll go from regular afternoon to the worst day of Sean's life, then okay, I guess. I think it's a little on the nose, whereas To All of You is hardly beating us over the head with anything. I don't know if I can easily put into words what that scene feels like and what emotions it brings up. The alternative for Life is Strange 2 is that no one thought about what this scene would convey. They just knew that Listomania is a bop and tossed it in there. I don't want to believe that, but I would get it. The song slaps. I wonder actually if the fact that I knew it before playing affects my feelings. The music in the first game is so obscure that I doubt anyone had that weird feeling. My pre-established nostalgia for Phoenix might be the problem. The only other music scene worth mentioning is the travel scene in episode 2, after leaving the cabin. Red is an awesome song, no doubt. Feels a lot more like the first game, which I'll reiterate again is not required, but I can't deny that it feels great. Beautiful cinematography and the gorgeous landscape don't hurt either. But let's compare this to something like the final scene in episode 1 from the first game. The second half of it specifically. The montage of Arcadia Bay citizens over obstacles has no dialogue, and all the scenes barely last a few seconds. We don't even know some of the characters yet, like Joyce and Frank. Maybe this is my nostalgia talking, but don't we get so much more out of this scene than the travel scene? David doing housework, Kate weeping in her room, and Victoria throwing away the missing poster all give us a feeling about what they are like and what to expect from them. Even for characters we haven't been introduced to yet, we can appreciate what we see here after knowing them. I've watched the travel scene multiple times now, and I'm not sure what I get from it that I didn't already know. Sean is worried about Daniel, it is cold outside, and we are walking. That was pre-established, so this doesn't do much for me. Nothing like seeing Victoria's jealous side after going back and forth on her throughout the episode. If we saw some of the resentment Daniel can potentially feel here, or more hiding from the police, or just something that we haven't been obsessing over for the previous hour of gameplay, I think this scene could match up with the best ones in the first game. If a lot of this feels opinionated and tough to pin down, well, yeah. Music is like that. Some people may hate every song in the first game and love the soundtrack of Life is Strange 2. Personal bias is going to affect whether a scene works for you or not. I just think that there is a lack of thematic cohesion in the sequel's songs that Life is Strange nailed down almost immediately. Episode 5, The Problems. The first scene in Life is Strange introduces us to a problem. Big, scary storm is going to destroy everything. Not good. The second problem we find out about not too long after. Rachel Amber has been missing for 6 months. We might not realize it then, but Rachel and the storm are going to be the driving force behind everything we do until Thursday. Each episode is haunted by supernatural phenomena and reminders of the tragedy that took place in the dark room before our adventure even started. The way this game hangs these terrors over our head is masterful. Just when you've forgotten about the apocalyptic vision in the opening, suicidal whales or twin moons force you to confront how small you are compared to the universe. If you stop thinking of that missing girl we keep hearing snippets about for a minute, you'll find yourself surrounded by missing posters or hearing yet another gruesome detail of her last days. The impact of feeling powerless against the storm and Mr. Jefferson while possessing the great power of time travel cannot be overstated. Then think about the smaller problems. All the high school drama, like Dana's pregnancy and relationship status, and Alyssa being accident prone. In the grand scheme of things, these issues are not pivotal. You may have even completely ignored them on your playthrough. But just like we discussed in the first part of this video, the problems we help these characters with make everything more engaging. Seeing the students in later episodes and hearing Max comment on developments with them makes everything feel like it matters. Neither the big or small issues are done as well in Life is Strange 2. This story is much more grounded and based in reality, despite still including psychic powers. The problems we've had hanging over our heads are, will the police find us, and where are we going to go? Certainly these are important issues, but where is the feeling of hopelessness? We are improving Daniel's powers, we found sanctuary at the Reynolds place, and when that didn't work, Daniel's powers got us out safely anyway. None of these moments have been perfect, sure, but it's felt like a bad situation slowly turning into a slightly worse one, instead of the hopeless tragedy of Arcadia Bay. And are there even any small issues to deal with? Sean was hoping to get laid before his father died, so I guess we can worry about his V-card. The whole religion thing in episode 2 feels kind of random, too. Nothing feels quite as natural as Brooke's crush on Warren or Daniel being bullied. I've said this repeatedly, but since it isn't likely that we'll see a lot of these characters again, it's hard to care about the details of their lives. Even if we do reunite with Lila or Brody, I would imagine that we won't have time to chat and catch up on their drama. Then compare how we are informed of these issues. Remember what I just said about the first game. There are perfectly placed reminders of the dangers in Arcadia Bay throughout the narrative. Unless you, the player, are thinking about it, what is there to remind you of the cops looking for you, besides Sean inner monologuing about it? That's right, it wouldn't be a Professor Madeline video if I didn't say the words show don't tell at some point. I think the sequel could benefit from a little extra time reminding us subtly of our wanted status. TV and radio in the background, actually hiding from cops, and more encounters with people who want to turn us in. I just feel like we're lacking that compelling grip that got us through the next paranormal anomaly or tragic revelation from the previous entry in the series.
Someday we will foresee obstacles through the blizzard, through the blizzard.
Bonus episode. And is that bad? So there are a few reasons that I think Life is Strange 2 isn't being received well by the first game's fandom. Let's think about the second question I asked in the title. Is that a bad thing? For reviews and perhaps sales, yes. I am seeing much more negativity for the game online than I am praise. But as for creating a narrative and experience, not necessarily. It is focusing on very different things from the original, such as what happens with the two main characters, much more than the ensemble cast and setting. It comes down to personal preference which storytelling method is better, but I am all for experimenting, and I think it would be a shame if Don't Nod just copied what made Life is Strange good. Now, finally, the question everyone wants answered. Do I like Life is Strange better than Life is Strange 2? Right now, with what we have so far, yes. But can you blame me? I'm a lesbian, I listen to punk music, and I went to a hipster artsy school. I relate to so much more of the first game. I wouldn't be surprised if male players identified more with Sean, or people with little brothers appreciated the sibling dynamic with Daniel. Heck, I'm sure that Latinx people, anyone who has been homeless, or those who may have lost a parent, have gotten more out of the serious moments than me. I've liked all of these themes and plot details, but the overall package has yet to dethrone the first game in the series. I would love for that to change, because it would be a hell of a game to put Max and Chloe in second place. Maybe I'll revisit this topic when new episodes come or after everything is finished, in a billion years. Until then, it has been hella tight chilling with you hippies. Shaka bra. See you next time.